just to say again that Ajahn Sundara couldn't make it today because she lost the internet connection at the monastery. There was a power line, a tree brought down the lines, including the internet connection. So they haven't fixed it yet. So she asked me to take it this week, and next week she'll be leading the group. So it's lovely to see you all. And I'll make a start in the usual way by chanting the dedication of offerings and the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. I'll share that with you. And I think so everyone is muted, so there we are. To the Blessed One, the Lord, who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dhammam saranam gacchāmi, Sangham saranam gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchāmi. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Meriya Majjapamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sigatinyanti Silena Bhugasampada Silena Niputinyanti Tasma Silam Visodhaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I'll guide you in meditation. Just a few pointers, and then I'll give some reflections, and then I look forward to receiving some questions from you. So to begin, establishing an upright posture, comfortable yet upright. If you have been meditating for some time, then that will come to you very easily and naturally. But if you're fairly new to meditation, then you may have to give some deliberate thought to establishing a posture that's both upright and relaxed. It's helpful to remember that we support the spine from the base, not from holding it up at the shoulders. So to access the muscles at the base of the spine, it can be helpful to lean forward and back again, so that we feel a natural curvature at the base of the spine. And bring the shoulders back a little, making the shoulders so that the arms hang at the sides of the body in a very central position. And tucking in the chin, holding the head upright. And because it's, we spent our day perhaps with our neck bent forward, looking down at a computer screen, or with our shoulders quite tight and hunched, maybe because out of a habit of tensing up around the neck, then it's helpful to make quite a deliberate intention of relaxing the shoulders. So how do you do that? And you have to discover this for yourself, but to get the sense of the shoulders dropping, when maybe one at a time, drop the right shoulder, drop the left shoulder, so that the arms just hang naturally at the side of the body, and letting the tension in the shoulders fall away. Another place that we hold a lot of tension is in the face. And it's helpful to deliberately relax in the face, muscles in the face. So I suggest you give some time to just exploring how to drop the jaw, to relax the cheekbones. So I find it helpful to have a little mental tour of the sensations in the body, just to notice where there's any tension. If you were starting in the face and then exploring the neck and the shoulders, then carry on your journey, going down the body. See if there's any tension in the stomach area, and in the arms and the hands, in the legs. And when you find an area of tension, then try to unclench that muscle. See whether it's possible just to unclench, because tension is something that we're doing. The natural state is for the body to be relaxed. So noticing tension in the body, it's okay to say deliberately, to think, relax. release, then let it go. Just experiment with unclenching the muscles that you notice are tense. Bring our attention to the body. We're not judging, saying it should be this way or that way. So there's no standard by which it should be. If we notice tension, then that's good enough to notice it. It doesn't have to go away. Noticing is enough. We don't need to fix anything. There's no need to hold on. We can let tension go, but if it doesn't go, it stays. That's okay. It doesn't matter. We just observe it. Observing is enough. Noticing is enough. It's good enough. This attitude of good enough is a very important attitude to bring to our meditation practice. We're not trying to strive to some ideal of perfection. We're just noticing the way it is. Being willing to accept the good enoughness of the way it is our practice. This is meditation practice. So many of you will have an established practice, thinking, maybe you focus on the breath, or you choose to cultivate loving kindness, whatever that might be, whatever practice you have. This is good. What I really want to talk about is what to do with the mind, mental activity. So we whatever object we choose to focus on, to as a basis, whatever object we use as a basis to practice from, we'll experience thoughts, mental activity, what we might describe as the distraction. So I would like to encourage you to let go of that word distraction, to bring whatever mental activity you experience into your meditation. But just simply don't believe it. Whatever thoughts arise, don't believe them. Just let them come and go. Notice them. And let them arise and cease. Knowing them for what they are, just simply mental activity, rather than thinking they're getting in the way. They're just part of your meditation experience. So with mindfulness, we don't judge, we don't say, it should be like this, or it shouldn't be like that. We just notice the way it is. And we're not judging the mind, saying, it shouldn't be like this. But we're not believing in the content. We allow it to come and go. So if thoughts arise that we dislike and we don't want, and deliberately accept them, allow them to be. Don't turn away. Don't push them away. Let them be. If the thoughts are pleasant and enjoyable and we want them more, then don't interfere, just let them be. We don't need to seek out nor push away. Don't trust any of them. Don't believe in any of them. Just let them come and go in their own time. So that's my inner bell bringing the meditation to an end. To adjust your posture if you need to. So I think it would be good to say a few words about turning the attention towards the thinking mind. Because this is what I feel in my own practice as being so incredibly beneficial. The mind can create, the mind's filled with concepts. That's the ideas are concepts which we create. And so to talk about the mind, we use concepts. To talk about anything, you have to use concepts. And how we understand concepts is we compare them to ideas that we already have. So if I talk about the mind and say, let's say, if I describe something in a particular way, then you have to compare that description with what you've already experienced in order to understand what I mean. And it's very easy to get carried away with concepts. But it's what we have to work with. That's all we can do is talk in terms of concepts, your thought. So when I say turning towards the mind, to look at, to experience, and to open up to thoughts and let them come and go, then that's a way of describing an experience. You can only use your own experience to understand that with. So I'm turning towards the mind, letting thoughts come and go. So what do we experience when we turn towards the mind? We experience preferences. Whatever arises in the mind, we form a preference about something that we bring greed and hate towards, desire and aversion. So we find something desirable and we move towards it. If we dislike it, we move away from it. So we look at our thoughts, we experience our thoughts, and when we bring the desire mind to them, we bring our preference. We think, I like that thought. And you move towards it. If you dislike it, you suppress it, you move away from it. And so we follow the grasping mind, the habit, the conditioned habitual tendencies to move towards and away from in relation to the thoughts that arise in our minds. But there's another way to relate to the mind, and one is to notice and not follow our preferences. We might notice our preference. We don't need to follow it. We might notice our desire to suppress a thought, but allow it in. And that means not relating with our conditioned way of thinking, but to relate with mindfulness, noticing and allowing things to be as they are. Allowing thoughts to arise and cease means to notice with mindfulness what arises and allow it to arise, and what ceases and allow it to cease in its own time, allowing it to come and go, allowing the mind to flow without interfering. This is really quite radical because we're brought up, conditioned to interfere with the mind, to say that this is good and this is bad, and this should be, this is something that should be cultivated and allowed. This is something that should be suppressed and got rid of. And that's a judgmental way of thinking. To allow the mind to be at ease, to let it be, to not interfere, to allow it to flow naturally, that takes a lot of courage. Because to be fearless in not resisting unpleasant mental states, to be fearless in allowing them to arise, not suppress them, that takes courage. And simply to resist the temptation to follow the desirable states, to see them for what they are, but not follow them. That's quite challenging, difficult. It can be difficult. Though it's like to bear with. We have to bear with both pleasant and unpleasant states. It's a kind of experience of bearing with, to allow them to be, not to follow, not to chase after, not to run away from. But this is the practice of mindfulness. To notice is enough, because we know, how does that work? How can that be of any benefit? Surely everything we've been taught is that we have to get rid of unwholesome, cultivate the wholesome, for example. Surely that means we have to interfere with the mind. We have to control it. But if we have the idea that I have to control the mind, then we control it with our conditioned views and opinions about how it should be. There's no real knowing in that. We impose what we think we know on the mind. We don't really investigate and learn. We say that's bad and I've got to get rid of it. And before we know what's happened, we've suppressed it and it's gone. It's hidden. We say that's good. And when we cultivate it, we get lost in it. So we don't really learn. We don't really learn anything about anger by suppressing it. We know it's bad. We can say that. We can say it shouldn't be this way. But we don't learn anything if we suppress it, because it's just hidden. Hidden from our insight, our opportunity to see. But when we allow it to manifest, we learn what it is, and we can let it come and go. That means we're no longer frightened of it, no longer fearful. So every unwholesome state we need to develop fearlessness towards, to allow it to come and go. It doesn't mean that we're cultivating it necessarily for the sake of, you can cultivate it in order to see it, so you can understand it. But we're not trying to live our lives in hatred. What we're doing is we're freeing ourselves from hatred, because when you allow it, when you can allow it to arise, you can understand it. When you understand it, it loses its power. You know it for what it is. It doesn't control you. So you can let it go. It will come and go. Understand it, the natural human condition to have aversion. It's the natural human condition to have lust. It's a natural human experience. Not if we're frightened of it, if we run away from it, if we chase after it. Whatever we do, we create confusion. If we can just observe it, allow it to arise and cease, we can be fearless, develop fearlessness with regard to lust. This is incredible. And you'd think it was impossible, but yet it is possible to turn and face thoughts, allow them to come and go in their own time. To bear with them. And that there's a freedom in that. That's amazing. That there's freedom in allowing the mind. Because if we interfere, if we say it should be like this, it shouldn't be like that, then there's no freedom in that. Because we can't control the mind. The mind's capable of thinking anything. If you control it in the sense of preventing it from thinking something, then it will simply wait its time until it can come up. You can only suppress for so long. So there's no real peace in that. There's only peace in the mind if you can allow it to be free, allow it to flow in a natural way, in the way you don't need to interfere, because there's nothing to be frightened of. There's nothing that the mind can bring to you that you need to turn away from. Nothing it can bring to you that you need to chase after. So when the mind is let alone, let to be free, then that's freedom. You can be at ease. And of course, the mind loses its power, thoughts lose their power, because there's nothing, they get no reaction. If the thought can get no reaction, then it just comes and goes. So what's the key to this? Because you think, well, how can that be possible? But the key is the deluded mind. It's the delusion, the sense of our attachment to the self that creates the confusion, that creates the problem, if you like. Because there is no problem. But the mind, the self, when we add a sense of self to thoughts, then that's where preference comes from. I want this, I don't want that. When we identify with a thought, then we judge it. We say it should or shouldn't be this way. But when that sense of identifying with ceases, goes away, when that delusion isn't there, then thoughts can just come and go. And they just be known for what they are. That knowing happens because we're not distorting them with delusion, with that self-delusion. When that drops away, then you see thoughts as they are, and then they have no power. And so, as I said, you don't believe in them. So it's really helpful to see that is possible. So, you can take an attitude of not believing in thought. You can use a mantra like, "Are you sure?" with the thoughts that have come into the mind. And when you use that way of mantra, that can be a pathway to challenging what you think, what you believe, what you make out of, what you create out of thoughts, what you add to them when you make something out of them, the thoughts that come into the mind. When you're making something out of them, then you can ask, "Are you sure?" You say, "Oh, it shouldn't be like this." You can say, "Are you sure?" Or when you think, "Oh, this is the path, this is the way, this is how it should be," you can ask, "Are you sure?" Because that's a way of just stepping back from this way of believing in thought. Because you don't need to believe in it at all, any of it. And amazing, that this is just, it's just so radical, isn't it? Because our conditioning is that thinking is everything, that thinking is, why do we add so much importance to thinking? It comes out of that self-identification. What we think is who we think what we think is who we are. But what we think is just what we think. It's just thoughts that come and go in the mind. We don't need to add a self-identity to thoughts. When what we're doing when we do that is really tricking ourselves. We're making something, we're adding something that's not really there. We're making something out of just it's just a thought. We're adding something that's not really there when we add a self-identity to it. When we add a preference to thought, well, that's a delusion right there. So we can step back, and with mindfulness we can notice, because by stepping back we step back and don't trust, then we can see more clearly. I'm creating a delusion here. I'm making something out of this thought that's not real. It's just a thought. And what you're left with when you can look straight ahead at the mind without flinching, without turning this way or that, what you're left with when you can look straight ahead, then the thought has no power, in a sense. Thoughts just come and go. Then what are you left with? So that this is where conceptual thinking fails you, because whatever you say is what's left. When you put it into words and concepts, these are concepts, and you form concepts about that. But what we're talking about is the end of conceptual thinking, where concepts have no traction, if you like. Concepts may arise, but they don't. You're not driven by or owned by them. So concepts cease to work anymore. And it's interesting how people describe it. So some people, like Ajahn Chah, talks about consciousness. He uses certain ways of expressing the mind. Pure consciousness talks like that, uses words like that. If you build a concept around that, you miss the point. It's the end of conceptual thinking. There's nothing there. But yet there is. There's an access of at the heart level to the world. But there's no separation from it, in a sense, because that separation comes about through creating concepts that's driven through self-identity. So that's the direction of travel, isn't it, that we're heading? We're heading, and we're heading in that direction, and that is a helpful guide, because that means that it's a natural state. We're heading towards a natural state of mind where the mind's at ease and untroubled, that it's not deluded by concepts, and therefore is at ease with all beings, ease with oneself, and in all beings. There must be an easefulness there, because you're not going to create division or separation. So it's fascinating. I find this Buddhist path is fascinating. It's an incredible exploration of our experience, and wow, that's a path of mindfulness. That's the amazing thing, and for me that's the key, that it's possible to turn and face our experience and simply notice how it is, and that is enough. We don't need to fix anything, but our practice is not to believe in it either. We don't have to fix it, we don't have to believe in it. is to keep an inquiring, an open mind to our experiences. Is the Buddhist path. At least that's what I think. And I open that for your questions, and do please, maybe you can send me some chats in the chat box, and if you can think of anything, if you can conceive of anything, and don't be frightened to do that. But it is difficult. I mean, if you can put something into words, please do feel free. But you do feel, I know when I feel that words are such a limited medium to express these things and this experience. We have to move towards experience. It's connecting at the heart level that is the real guide, and concepts are such a limited way to, but it's all we have, so we have to work with that. So I would also add that loving kindness is another interesting thing I could talk a little bit about. Loving kindness is a concept, and when we cultivate loving kindness, we deliberately cultivate an emotional state using concepts. So we often encourage to think of someone for whom we feel love. That's a good example. We create this idea of someone so that if an emotional state of loving kindness will arise. And this is quite artificial. I know a lot of people find it quite difficult from that point of view, to artificially create loving kindness through the use of a concept, an idea, in order to cultivate an emotion. But that, we're using a tool. It's a tool. But what we're doing, we're heading towards something that's very beautiful, a very beautiful state of mind, which is wholesome. That's what loving kindness is. So it's not without value. So you can use the mind, but it's limited because it's based on an artificial. To a certain extent, it's artificial and it's conditioned. We're causing it to arise through conditions, so it's limited, but yet it still has a value. So it's an example of how we might live in the world and still use conceptual mind to our benefit. Yeah. So I've got a question. Could you explain Sankhara or talk more about them? I've realized that I'm still confused as to what they are and wouldn't know how to contemplate them. I don't think. I wouldn't know them. I wouldn't know how to contemplate them, I don't think. Specifically, do emotions fall into this category? Well, Sankhara, conditioned. The definition is conditioned volitional mental activity. That's one way of describing Sankhara. I think that's what you're talking about. And of course, conditioned volitional mental activity is a terribly big mouthful. So what are sankharas? They're conditioned. They arise through conditions. There's the volitional aspect of them. There's a movement, a sense of movement in the mind that's associated with them. They're a mental activity. So pretty much everything we experience, yes, we could say everything that arises in the mind is sankhara. How do you contemplate them? You notice. You can notice the conditioned nature of thoughts. You can notice that impulse to create that's karma. The karmic activity, karmic action that is associated with sankhara, so that when we're buying into our thoughts, we bring karma to them. We know that's action. So by buying into them, we are causing them to. We're developing, and we're developing these sankharas by buying into them, by buying into thought. Conditional, volitional, mental activity. It's quite a mouthful. And so contemplating our thoughts, we'll notice how the conditioned nature of them, how they arise, and cease. By not adding anything to them, we allow them to cease in their own time. So that means we're not adding more karmic conditions to our thoughts. That way we won't get the result of those karmic conditions. That encourages detachment from thoughts. And so then sankharas start to lose their power. As we become more detached from thoughts with continued practice, does this gradually erode our sense of self over time? Yes, it does. It's a useful practice to, you detach more from your thoughts, on believing in your mental activity, is a really huge step towards eroding our sense of self-identity because we identify so much with the thinking mind. So yes, it definitely does over time undermine. It could erode. It says erode the sense of self. It undermines the sense of self because we just simply don't believe in what the mind's telling us. And the drive of the ego, if you like, that keeps is that we're not feeding into it anymore. So it's a loop. There's no feedback loop on the ego. So it starts to disintegrate over time. And gradually, little bit by bit, every time we don't react to our impulsive way of thinking, we erode that sense of self. And of course, there's freedom in that. It's not that we're losing anything, but we're developing freedom. We're losing fearfulness. That's not nothing that we're losing. We're losing fear, and we're gaining courage. If I feel anger towards a friend, do I use mindfulness to face and note that anger without reacting to it? Yeah, that's right. If you feel anger, you use mindfulness to face and note that this is anger. I feel anger, and that will that's a way of stepping back and not reacting to it. So noticing anger isn't an angry thing, angry state of mind. The noticing in itself is not anger. So just noticing anger is a way of step. That's enough. That isn't anger. So you're not fueling the anger when you notice it. So you notice it and step back, and then you've got the freedom, a choice. You have the choice. You can react with wisdom. It's possible. You're not bound by the conditioned response that anger causes you to react with. And so that gives you the freedom to act skillfully. So that's interesting, you feel anger towards a friend, and but that moment, they're not a friend. When you feel anger towards them, you hate them. And they're not a friend at that moment. When we step back, we think, this is my friend. How can I give in to anger? How can I allow anger to get in the way of that friendship? And the anger dissipates. Also, it means that we can act with wisdom. So it might be possible to talk to your friend about the fact that when he said that, you felt, even to be honest and open and say, when you said that, I felt quite angry. But I thought about it and thought, I didn't want to react in an angry way. You can talk through it with your friend, because ultimately you might find be able to understand what it was together that your friend did, that you felt you didn't like, that there was something about it that upset you. And so that you can, they in the end of that conversation, your friend understands what they did that caused you to be upset, and you maybe understand why your friend acted in that way. So instead of anger being in charge, wisdom comes to the fore, and it's possible to learn something from it. So our path is a path of learning and understanding each other. So this is by turning and facing things. So if somebody says something that's upsetting, what can we learn from that? We're not saying, I shouldn't feel this way, and turning away and suppressing it. We're willing to investigate and understand. Why did I feel that way? Where did that come from? What's that about? There was another question. What can be the role of mantra in meditation? Is it cheating? Well, I don't know why it would be cheating. A mantra, in my way of thinking, is simply, say, you could take a mantra like let go, just let go, just let go. And, you could use that to quite skillfully. On the other hand, mantra you have to be careful, because you can take that too far and then start suppressing with it. You've got an unpleasant state. You keep saying, let go, as a way of pushing it away. So you can use mantras, but you need to use them skillfully. Having been brought up by a strictly religious family, and knowing deep down for many years the ideas I'd been raised with weren't making sense, just wish to say, having starting to undertake this Buddhist journey feels very liberating. I look forward to continuing with you all here. That's lovely, thank you. Yeah. Yes, I was brought up in a religious family, and it didn't make any sense. But what I did benefit from was one of the things which I benefited from was that raised a question in my mind. So I'm very grateful for the question. It didn't make sense, but when you say it doesn't make sense, it means that there was a question there that you were interested to investigate. So even though my background, my Christian background, it didn't make any sense. It created the question in my mind, and that was the beginning of my Buddhist journey. So that I'm very grateful for. And now, so I found sense in the Buddha's teaching, but perhaps if I hadn't been posed that question in my Christian background, when I was taught I should believe in God, but I couldn't, and it didn't make sense. If I hadn't been posed that question, then I might not have begun the journey. So I was grateful. I am grateful for that. So thank you very much for coming along today. Thank you very much for your questions. And I'd like to finish with the closing homage. I'll just share that screen. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So thank you, everyone. Hope you can come along next week to join with Ajahn Sundara.